Well, wonderful. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And yes, this is my first slide deck. I'm Lisa Chang. I am a retired ophthalmologist. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in Alamo, east of San Francisco. And I started volunteering in this climate legislative space in January 2017. I've worked mainly with 350 Bay Area Action, concentrating on the California legislature, and I've also worked with Citizens Climate Lobby, and they work at on the federal level. Now, when I first started, I did not even know who my elected representatives were. I pretty much knew zero about this process. And I am so happy to share what I do know, but there's a ton that I don't know. And I just want to offer myself up as a reference and research assistant. Just let me know what your questions are, and I will help look them up for you. You can grab my contact information and just let me know, if you need anything. And then, so without further ado, I also just want to say how appreciative I am that you guys are interested in learning about this process and participating and even stepping up to be leaders. And so my hat's off to you. So let's get started. I might be able to move us a little off to the side here, but the California state legislature is divided into two houses, the state Senate and the state assembly, and bills have to pass both houses in order to become law. So most of our climate bills would just need a simple majority to pass. And you can see from the numbers here that we don't just have a majority of Democrats, we have a comfortable 2/3 supermajority of Democrats in both houses. And yet, every time a climate bill comes up, it's a battle. So, why are climate bills so difficult to pass? Well, in a nutshell, it's the fossil fuel industry. The power and influence they wield and the money they spend on lobbying, it's crazy. You're going to be hearing a lot about WISPA, the Western States Petroleum Association. They're the largest and the most influential of the fossil fuel lobbying groups, but there are plenty more. And again, it's just staggering to me how much money is spent from the fossil fuel industry. It just dwarfs the amount of money that's spent by environmental groups and the renewable energy industry. There's also been a very damaging alliance formed between some of the major trade unions and the oil companies. It is really hard for Democratic legislators to vote against the unions. And so the opposition has been pretty successful in framing the debate as having to choose between jobs and the environment. And I put in a link here to an article that I think you'll enjoy reading. It's pretty eye-opening that goes into this more in detail, but let's just say not all Democrats are climate champions. Another roadblock that we're facing this year is the state budget. There's an estimated $38 to $68 billion deficit that we're facing in 2024. So it's going to be difficult to pass climate bills. It's going to be difficult to pass any kind of legislation that's going to cost the state money. And so our health voices are going to be more important than ever this year. Because what is the best counter to that framing of that we're looking at jobs versus the environment? I think the most effective counter to that is our voices saying, no, it's not just jobs, it's our health, it's our safety, it's our lives that are at stake. So the first thing I want to do, now, first of all, should I move us over here so that you guys can see this? So I just want to do a quick overview of how a bill becomes a law. And then I'm going to go over this in more detail later. But first, a bill is introduced, and the idea for a bill can really come from anyone. Certainly, they come from the legislative offices, but regular citizens can come up with ideas for bills and advocacy groups. So, for example, Climate Health Now could come up with an idea for a bill. And then try to find a legislator who will serve to be the bill's author. The bill is introduced, so the legislator will submit a draft of the bill to the Legislative Council's office, and that's where the bill will undergo a legal review. The official language will be drafted, and then a senator will come up to the Senate desk and introduce the bill, and that's when the bill receives a number. Senate bills are SB bills, and when an assembly member introduces their bill at the assembly desk and receives a number, that then is an assembly bill. So after a bill is introduced, there's a whole month when no activity can take place on the bill. And so that's when we can get ourselves organized. After that, a bill is referred to different policy committees. Each policy committee has analysts, and they research the bill. They might suggest amendments. They make the recommendations to the committee, and the committee votes. If the bill passes, it's on its way. If it doesn't pass, it's dead. Most bills that have any kind of a fiscal impact, which means it's going to cost the state money, will go to the mysterious Appropriations Committee, and we'll talk more about that later. And if it passes out of the Appropriations Committee, it goes to a floor vote. So for example, if a bill is introduced by a senator, it must pass the Senate committee hearings. It must pass out of Senate appropriations and then is voted on by all of the state senators. If it passes, it heads over to the other house, in this case, the assembly, and the whole process starts over again. It has to pass the assembly committees, assembly appropriations, and then it has to be voted on by all of the assembly members. If it passes out of the second house without any changes, it goes to the governor. If in the second house they make any amendments, it has to go back to the first house for something called a concurrence vote, because they have to be sure that they still like the changes, that they're still okay with the bill after the changes that were made in the first house. And if it passes the concurrence vote, it goes to the governor. And if the governor doesn't veto it and okays it, it goes to the Secretary of State. And that's where the bill is chaptered and becomes a statute. And most bills, most of these statutes become law on January 1st of the following year. And so the next thing I want to do is to go over this process in a little bit more detail. And I'll add in some of the deadlines that we'll be looking at, and also places along the way where we can advocate for the bills. So the legislative timeline. The legislature actually operates on a 2-year cycle. And so it goes from odd to even years. And we're now in year 2 of the legislative cycle. So in the second year, the legislative session is actually a little shorter than in the first year, and that's because of the elections in November. So all of the assembly members have 2-year terms, and all of the senators have 4-year terms. So this year, all of the assembly members and half of the senators may run for re-election, and so they need time to get home and start campaigning. So the legislative session is abbreviated to give them time to campaign, and it's harder to pass bills. So what I've tried to do here, and so let me ask you right away, can you actually see this, or, are our faces blocking here? Because what I've tried to do, I'm going to move our little faces.
So we can see the whole screen perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I tried here in these next few slides to set up a calendar of sorts. So in the blue part, I've tried to set up what's happening with our bill. And over here, the actions that we can be taking to help our bill along. So I put a ton of information in here. My hope is that you can use this slide deck as a reference. I tried to put everything on here that might be helpful to you, and also so that you don't have to feel like you have to take notes now. But I'm not going to cover everything, kind of, it's a ton, but we'll just get started. So in February and March, where's our bill? It's already been through legal counsel, and February 16th was the deadline for new bills to be introduced. No action is allowed on the bill for an entire month after the bill is introduced. And so this is when we as activists get going. The first thing that you do is you call the author's office. So for example, last year we all worked together on Phil Ting's Zero EV school bus bill, AB 579. And the first thing to do is just look up the person's website and call. Make a call to the office, and you ask, who is the staffer working on the bill? When you go to the assembly member or the senator's website, all of the legislators have a Sacramento office, and that's usually where work on legislation is done. And they also have a district office in their home, district. And that's often where constituent matters are going on. That's where they take care of constituent matters. I usually call the Sacramento number first, but if nobody picks up there, just call the district office also. And there's usually some lovely person answering the phone, and they will help you figure out who is staffing your bill. Then you get the staffers' contact information, contact them. They are usually thrilled to hear from us that we want to help with their bill. And you ask for a few things, the bill fact sheet, and then you can say, is there a sponsor? Because the sponsor might be the nonprofit that came up with the idea for the bill. Last year, the sponsor really helped coordinate all of our advocacy efforts around the Zero EV school bus bill. And you say, are there other supporters that we can form a coalition with? Is there already a coalition? And you can start strategizing. You can ask them, what kind of help do you think the bill will need? And, at what point in the process do you think a roadblock might come up? This is also the time when we want to prepare a support letter. Last year, Climate Health Now put together this amazing health talking points fact sheet. It was just absolutely amazing. So that's the kind of thing that you could be working on at this point. And then after that month of enforced inactivity, the bill is going to be assigned to one or more policy committees. So who is going to decide which policy committees the bill goes to? Well, it's the Senate or Assembly Rules Committees, and they are chaired by the Senate and Assembly leaders. And these are very powerful people. They also appoint all of the policy committee chairs and members. This year on the Senate side, we have a brand new leader. The Senate pro tem is Mike McGuire, and his district, what actually includes the entire coast from Marin all the way up to the Oregon border. And over on the assembly side, the speaker is Robert Rivas. Robert Rivas actually he became assembly speaker last July. He engaged in a long battle with the previous assembly speaker and won. And so we're probably going to see a whole lot of new policy committee chairs and members. I talked to one legislative staffer who said, I think he felt it was kind of like high school. If you supported the person who lost, you might end up losing some of your plum committee assignments. The person who was the leader before Mike McGuire, Tony Atkins from San Diego, she is terming out because there are term limits. It's 12 years total for the Assembly, for the Senate, lifetime total, or any combination of the two. So it's right around maybe in the next week or two in March when we find out which policy committee our bill has been assigned to. And so I want to take a moment and show you how to research the policy committees. So I put in the links to the Senate and Assembly websites. And so let's just go ahead and click on the Senate website to start with. And there is our new Senate pro tem leader, Mike McGuire. And then it's kind of interesting just to look around these websites, but here's where you'll find the information on the committees. Let's click on committees. And here you'll find the 20-some policy committees or standing committees in the Senate. Now, when you go over to the Assembly side, they have 30-some standing committees. So it's different. It's very different. Climate bills might be heard, let's say, in energies, utilities, and communications, maybe transportation, maybe natural resources and water. Our zero EV school bus bill was heard in Senate Education. So let's just, for example, just go there. All of the committees have their own websites. And so when you look at the website, you can say, oh, look, here's the person who chairs the committee. Here are the other members of the committee. You know, if we have members in our group who are constituents of any of these people, that can be very powerful. Absolutely anyone can contact any of these members to say, oh, please vote yes on our bill. But constituents have a little bit of extra clout because, of course, all of these folks really want their own constituents to support them and, of course, to vote for them when they're up for re-election. There's also information here on how to submit our support letters. There's actually a portal right here. And so you click on this and you set up an account and it gives you all of the instructions of how and when to submit our support letter. It also tells you what kind of formatting they need and the very important deadline, the deadline by which we have to submit our letter. It can be kind of confusing on when all of this is actually happening. And I highly recommend, what I did just all the time is just to call the committee phone number. Usually one of these lovely committee staff people will answer the phone and they give you the most up-to-date information. In fact, this also shows, I mentioned before that there are analysts that analyze the bill. That's who these folks are, you know, right here. And so if we get our letter in by the deadline, the analysts will see our support letters before they write their report. And so this is our way of influencing them. And also, if we get our letter in by the deadline, we will be listed on the analysis as supporters. This is where you find out when and where the hearing for your bill will take place. And so on the actual day of the hearing, that's kind of interesting, the author will come and to the committee meeting, present their bill. There's usually one or two key witnesses who will speak in support of the bill and in opposition. And after they speak, then they ask, is there anyone from the public who would like to weigh in? And so this is our chance to give what are called Me Toos. And so what you do is you stand up at the microphone in the committee. They pretty much just want you to say your name, the organization that you represent, and that you support the bill. So I might stand up there and go, I'm Dr. Lisa Chang with Climate Health Now, strongly support. And then the next person gives their Me Too. And this year, they are only allowing in-person Me Toos in Sacramento at the hearings. There won't be any phone-in or remote Me Toos. And so if we have any members who live in Sacramento or are willing to travel up to Sacramento, they can give the Me Toos in person. And this is a great time to have coalition partners because it's, you know, then you could just kind of say, hey, is anybody in your group heading up to, you know, Sacramento? You know, can they give the Me Toos for our group? And likewise, we can do that favor for other folks. I'm trying to get back to my slideshow here. Let me just see if I can get out. This little thing here is blocking my
It's
slide.
so
There
hard
we
to see.
go. Oh, always
I'm like,
something.
There you go.
you got it. Yeah.
Okay, so after we give our Me Toos, then the committee will actually vote. And they can vote to pass the bill, pass it with amendments, or defeat it. And this is a tough time because if the bill's defeated, it dies. And so we could have a whole campaign all set up and the bill dies in the first committee. We want to read the amendments that are made because sometimes the amendments are stringent enough that we don't even want to support the bill anymore. Sometimes the author of the bill will pull the bill because the amendments, are just going to be too onerous. So there's a lot going on here, but if it passes out of the committees, it might be assigned to another committee. And then eventually, if the bill has any sort of fiscal impact, the bill will go to the mysterious Appropriations Committee. Okay, so appropriations. Again, any bill that's going to cost the state money is going to go to appropriations. Just like before, we look up when's the hearing, but it turns out that at the hearing, unlike in the policy committee meetings, they're probably not going to discuss the bill and there won't be a vote on the bill because most of the bills will go into the mysterious suspense file. Okay, so what bills go into the suspense file? If the state cost, the fiscal impact of the bill is over $50,000 in the Senate, which is nothing, or over $150,000 in the Assembly, likewise nothing, the bill will go directly into the suspense file. And then you wait around for a couple weeks and there's a suspense hearing. And this is a crazy day. So you might be listening in or even attending the suspense hearing. And they will rattle off the names, maybe of hundreds of bills. And if your bill comes out of suspense, the Appropriations Committee will usually just vote on it right then and it passes. Yay. But if your bill does not come out of suspense, it dies. And there's usually no explanation of why the bill didn't come out of suspense. And so basically, there's a lack of transparency and accountability. And from what we can gather, the appropriations chair may be the one that's all powerful in determining whether a bill dies or comes out of the suspense file. And many bills die in suspense. And we think the leaders, the pro tem and the assembly speaker, are also very powerful in this kind of behind the scenes, moment. So we have two new appropriations chairs this year. So in the Assembly, it's Buffy Wicks, and her district includes Oakland, Berkeley, and Richmond. And we just found out that the Senate Appropriations Chair is going to be Ana Caballero, and her district includes Fresno and Merced. Now, last year, when our bill was in appropriations, Climate Health Now and some of the other coalition partners mounted a magnificent campaign to get the bill out of suspense. And I believe Schwinn's going to be talking about that next time. So the timing of this is so crazy. Sometimes that suspense hearing is on a Friday. So this year it might be on Friday, May 17th, and the floor vote could happen as early as the following Monday. It's crazy, the timing. And so we want to be ready. And so before the floor vote, we want to have our blast set up to set out to our memberships to call and email their legislators. Now, the legislative office or the sponsor may help us target blasts. And maybe we can just target the constituents of legislators who are on the fence. So, because we don't want to waste everyone's time by having people call the bill's author or something like that. And also, we want to encourage our constituents to establish a relationship with their legislators and to lobby for bills way early in the legislative cycle. Because if you wait until that Friday, it's just going to be too late. And this is what I've spent a lot of my time doing. My particular state senator is one of the least progressive Dems in the legislature, and he is always seems to be on the fence on climate bills. And so we have spent a lot of time in our district setting up this relationship. And if you're interested in doing that or setting up a constituent meeting, let me know, and I'll be glad to help with that. So the floor vote happens. If the bill passes, it goes to the other house and the whole process starts over again. It turns out that this next session in the other house is shorter. And so it's tough to get bills passed. The Assembly traditionally has been less progressive than the Senate. So for example, if a bill starts in the Senate and then goes to the Assembly, this shorter time frame works against us. And also the oil and gas lobbying can really come in hard during this time. And I just put over here just some ways to keep up to date and keep track of your bill because, over the year, there's a lot going on. And so I particularly wanted to show you Ledge Info. So Ledge Info is one of our most useful tools for keeping track of legislation. You can search for a bill in Ledge Info by bill number, by author, by keywords. And so just by a way of illustration, let's look at AB 579, and that is our zero EV school bus bill. Let's do a search. And then you can see there's all sorts of information that you can find out about the bill. What you especially want to do right from the start is to click here on Track the Bill. You set up an account, and then you can sign up to track multiple bills, and you can get notifications. You can get an email when, for example, whenever your bill is amended or when it's scheduled for a hearing. It's a fantastic way to keep track of your bill. Unfortunately, it's not always up to date, so you may not want to depend on it, but it's still super useful. I mentioned before that I wanted to show you a bill analysis. And so, for example, let's look at the bill analysis that happened with our school bus bill when it first went to Assembly Education. Just going to move our little faces out of the way so I can bring up that analysis. Okay, I was pretty impressed at just how extensive these analyses were. I mean, this just goes on for pages, and it, with arguments in support of the bill and opposition, health talking points, how the funding is going to be. But I did want to show you that at the end of the bill, again, if we are able to get our letter submitted to the portal in time, this is where we would be listed as supporters. And it's also always interesting to see who is opposed. And this actually will tell which of the analysts prepared this and her contact information. So you can actually, contact them to learn more about, how they felt about the bill. I wanted to show you maybe one other bill. I found this kind of confusing at the beginning. This was one of our favorite bills. SB 1137 would mandate 3,200 foot setbacks from oil and gas drilling. It turns out that with each session, they recycle the bill numbers. So if I just search for SB 1137, I say like, oh, wait a minute, in this tiny text, it's discrimination claims. What's that all about? And so you'd go back and say, oh, this bill was in the previous session. Let me see if I can get that to toggle, 2021, 2022. And now if I search, okay, here it is, oil and gas, health protection zones. You can read the actual text of the bill. It gives you all sorts of information, where's the bill analysis, all of this. And it's sometimes interesting to look at the bill votes. The last vote that was taken was on the Senate floor. The bill passed with 25 ayes, 10 noes, and 5 NVRs. That means no vote recorded. So this actually says which of the senators voted aye, and often these are usually Dems, maybe some of the more progressive Dems. The noes are often Republicans. And under NVR, a lot of times we find the Dems that are maybe less progressive. For example, there's my guy, right there. So that is Ledge Info. Again, you'll just find a lot of information that is hopefully useful. And we'll go back to the slideshow.
Lisa, is there a limit to how many non-votes they can have A year?
Oh, not to my knowledge. I think that they're just willing to
Wow.
say not be too courageous in in how their
Mm.
votes go. Um, and we often go back because again, I've got maybe the least progressive guy and we'll go, yeah, he's NVR again. But every once in a while we've been lobbying on a bill and said, wow, we voted yes, and so we take that as a win. So again, if the bill passes out of both houses, then it goes to the governor. Okay, so here we are with the governor. The governor must decide on what to do with the bill by September 30th. If he vetoes the bill, it needs a 2/3 majority in both houses to override the veto, and my understanding is that hardly ever happens. If the governor signs the bill, and interestingly enough, if he neither signs nor vetoes the bill, if he just doesn't act on it, it passes. And it will go to the Secretary of State where the bill is chaptered and becomes a statute. And then we celebrate because, that is a major achievement. And then we say, oh, and again, Climate Health Now was amazing in lobbying the governor to sign our bill. And again, I'll leave that for Schwinn next time to go into the details of that wonderful campaign. And so are we done? Not quite yet. I was asked to discuss what the difference is between legislation and regulations. So legislation is passed by the legislature, but it's the regulatory agencies that create the regulations or rules that implement and enforce the legislation passed by the state legislature. So the legislation passed by the legislature provides the framework, and the regulatory agencies and the executive branch overseen by the governor's office, they create the specific details and guidelines. And here are some of the state regulatory agencies that enforce climate laws. That includes CARB, the CPUC, the California Energy Commission, and CalGEM. And so, are we done? Wait, not quite yet. Is also asked to explain what a referendum is. So if legislation is passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor, that can be challenged and repealed at the ballot box through the referendum process. Okay, so this was so frustrating. Back in September 2022, SB 1137 requiring 3,200-foot setbacks from oil and gas drilling. It passed after well over a decade of advocacy and was signed into law by the governor. But the fossil fuel industry led a referendum effort, and they were able to obtain enough signatures so that a referendum to repeal SB 1137 is going to be on the ballot for this November. And because they qualified for this referendum, we can't start enforcing that law until after the vote takes place in November. It's very frustrating. And the California Independent Petroleum Association that led the referendum effort has been accused of using deceptive tactics to obtain signatures. So people would say that, like someone would come up to them at a farmer's market and say, hey, do you want to sign a petition to lower gas prices? And there was no explanation of what the bill really entailed, nor who was paying the person who was collecting the signatures. And so, I was thrilled to see that Climate Health Now is already taking a leadership role in supporting SB 1137 in its referendum battle, because there's going to be a lot of money thrown at this from the oil and gas industry, and our health voices will be crucial to support SB 1137. And so I just wanted to take a moment to kind of say, I know that this is like a lot of information and not everybody can commit to working on this full time, and that there are so many ways to contribute with flexible or even just a minimum time commitment. And so when you're trying to get folks to join you in this effort, this is, I think, a point well worth making. For example, if someone literally has 2 or 3 minutes to devote to the cause, they could call or email their legislator when they receive a blast. It's impactful. So we've gone into legislative offices and they'll show us their spreadsheets. And so when the legislator is about to go in and vote, they'll ask the office, have any constituents weighed in? And there's a big difference between them saying, no, nobody's called in, or saying, oh, actually, there are 80 people who want you to vote yes on the bill, and there's no one in opposition. And you don't have to really know the bill. You don't have to explain why you think they need to vote yes. They basically they want your name, where you live, so that they know that you're a constituent and whether you want them to vote yes or no. I mean, I always have my spouse, even my kids, call in, I mean, the kids might not count, but it's such a cool thing for them to do. And the legislative offices, of course, they just want to hear from all of their constituents. And so this is a way to really have an impact that really just takes a few minutes. And I think studies show that when they ask people, like, have you ever contacted your elected official? And then they ask, like, well, why not? It's like, because nobody's ever asked me to. And so it is not um, anything to avoid doing or to be frightened of doing, because the folks who answer the phones in these offices, their whole job is to be nice to constituents. And really, they just want to, just tick off the box, yes or no, and add you to the spreadsheet. Okay, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that can be done, drafting letters and the health fact sheets and op-eds and letters to the editor and writing talking points and developing social media toolkit. And some people love doing this, and you can do it at your leisure, or at whenever you can find time. Somebody who's good at writing letters to the editor could write 10 different ones and ask 10 different people to submit them to different newspapers. This year, if you want to be a real hero, maybe devote a day to go up to Sacramento to give the Me Too's. Before COVID, I went up several times, and it can be kind of really fun. Like, you go up with your friends, and then you have a list of all the bills that are being heard, maybe from different organizations, and you kind of dash around from hearing room to give the Me Too's. But it's also really cool to see the Capitol and to kind of feel like you're right there where, laws are being made. You can stop in and talk to your maybe own legislative office, have lunch in the cafeteria. I thought it was kind of like a really fun day. Um, and then also you could attend a constituent meeting with your legislator. As I said, this is kind of what I've spent a lot of time doing because of my reluctant legislator. And again, you don't have to be an expert. This not being an expert, I think being in the health profession, it really bothered me at the beginning, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm an ophthalmologist, and should I be talking about how PM 2.5 affects, pregnant women? And the legislator offices, they don't care. They see us as trusted health voices, people who don't have a particular agenda except that we care for people's health. And so you can go in, maybe have some pre-prepared talking points. You trust your team that they vetted the bill and that this is a good idea, and you can deliver a minute, of talking points. We had a legislative meeting last year, and I think it was amazing. Like, with 24 hours notice, we had 4 Climate Health Now people attend. People zoomed in, from their offices. I think it was very impressive for the legislator to see these folks live in my district, or they see patients in my district. And, you know, we've heard time and time again from my reluctant legislator, oh, we see the enviros are for this. And, oh, but the Chamber of Commerce says that this is a job killer. Or what about the jobs? And, what about the economy? And again, our trusted health voices matter. And then I'm going to put a plug in for working to elect climate champions. This tends to be what I concentrate on the even years. In the odd years, maybe I'll work more on legislation. So vote, get your family, friends, your patients to vote. I happen to see there are a couple trainings for the Environmental Voter Project on postcarding for this next election. I just, put them in there if you're interested. I mean, I've just seen firsthand, I have an assembly member who is an environmental attorney with young kids. She is amazing. And then I've got the state senator who's, one of the least progressive Dems. And it is just so much more rewarding to work with an office where she's leading the charge versus constantly having to cajole and, entreat this reluctant person who, by the way, in 7 years has never once met with us in person, to try to get him to vote, the way we would hope that he would. And so, gosh, electing somebody right at the beginning who's a climate champion, huge, huge difference. And then my final slide, oh my gosh, you guys have been so patient. I have some of my favorite resources. And so the first one, I put a link to this Citizens Handbook to Influencing Elected Officials. I went to a Washington, D.C. conference for Citizens Climate Lobby, and this Brad Fitch spoke. He was amazing. This is a $10 paperback, and it's just full of pearls. It's just so easy to read. It's a combination of the experience of him being on Capitol Hill for so many years, but also did polling and some research on how to influence legislators, how to set up constituent meetings, how to write letters to the editor that will get published. What really speaks to legislators. He talks about things that we talk about, the power of the personal story, the personal relationships. And I just love this book. So I am, you know, if I have a link to it, if you want to take a look at it.
We
There,
should send a copy to all of our members
right?
as a gift.
I exactly like that's what I've started doing too to new members. Um, these are really cool, and I just thought you might like to have the links right here because California Environmental Voters and Sierra Club, they'll list all the assembly people and all of the senators and, give them a grade. It talks about who took oil money. It talks about how much oil money they took. And it's a really great way to just get a really quick idea of who you might be dealing with. So for example, I'll go to you guys can take a look at this, but I went to this legislative scorecard and I said, let's look at Senator Portantino. We worked with him a lot, on the Appropriations Committee. And wow, he got a 99% rating and the little decal that said that he didn't take fossil fuel money. And I said, well, let me look up Ana Caballero, the new person coming in. Schwinn and I were talking about this and I looked just like, uh-oh, 27% rating. Uh-oh, did take fossil fuel money. And of course, it's not the whole story, but when you want to get a quick idea of who you're dealing with, I just think these are great. And then I put in a couple of documents that 350 Bay Area Action that we use when we are working on bills. There's this very extensive checklist for how to track bills, and there's a bill resource document. I might just show you quickly what that looks like. Whenever we endorse a bill, we all have to, whoever's tracking the bill fills out the bill resource document. There's a link to LegInfo to where the bill is. There's the fact sheet. I mentioned that when you first contact the legislator's office, you ask for the fact sheet. So here's the fact sheet from Ting's office, the bill analysis. It's a very cool social media toolkit that our sponsor shared with us. I can show you that later. And also just a description of the bill, why this is important, how does this mesh with our values, with our platform, and also where we see the possible stumbling blocks, strategy, who's supporting the bill. It's kind of just like a nice Google Doc where everybody can get on board and just have all of this information at your fingertips. I had asked last year in 350 Bay Area actually was kind of saying, well, we kind of don't want everybody just to use this, but sure, cut and paste from it, and make it your own. So I just thought I'd include it there.
The
I'm
template is amazing. We totally want to copy that, just like
right.
methodical way.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's
Right,
brilliant.
right, right. So I did ask permission. They said, "Oh yeah, if people want to cut and paste and kind of use it, So and because I thought we're all on the same team, I really hate the idea of reduplicating efforts. This is a lot of work, and so if you have coalition partners, I mean, I just thought our collaboration last year was amazing. I started working on that AB 579, kind of like the lonely voice. And then as folks came on board, I honestly think, I mean, CHN was just magnificent. And I truly believe that our collaborative work with the 350 groups in Southern California in CHN is what put that bill over the top. And so I'm just so looking forward to collaborating with you all again. Again, I am happy to be a resource. You can share my contact information, call me, ask me questions, just whatever I can do to help. I'm happy to do that. And with that, I'm just going to be quiet. Thank you for listening to all that talking.
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Oh
Woo-hoo.
my gosh. And
This
then if you have any questions.
I wish we would have asked you to join us 4 years ago and every year. But
Aw.
I learned so much and I really appreciate you taking the time. I can't believe this was your first slides.
Oh, talk about personal growth. I learned so much by researching this. And I was telling Ashley, I've had this block against, making slide decks. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to watch a YouTube video and figure
You
out how to
nailed
do
it. You
this.
nailed it. Um,
Oh
Thank
my
you so much. We have time if anybody has questions. There's been a lot of questioning in the chat, Lisa, of could
God.
we look at these slides?
Oh gosh, they are yours. They are yours. I was really hoping that I thought, what would I have liked to have had? And I just tried to put
Mhm.
all the information, all the links, so it's all in one place. And that's why, usually for a talk, I would never put that much information on a slide, but I thought maybe you could use it as a
Yeah,
reference. And so
yeah.
please just use it and use it in any way that's helpful to you.
Okay.
And if you have any thoughts of how to change it or amend it or other things that might be helpful, please let me know and I will, change it for the next group. But in the meantime,
Yeah.
do
Thank you.
it as you will.
I just want to also especially lift up our five CHNs, and then we'll go to questions. CHN's advocacy advisory co-leads, because we have Thea and Hina and Alex and Vanessa and Zoe was with us. Yeah, and Zoe too, who are going to be leading CHN's probably 2 campaigns this year with lots of support. But this is like super relevant and just couldn't be more useful information. So thank you. And then I see Vanessa, you have your hand raised if you want to type in.
Yeah, so I just can't say how great working with Lisa was last year.
Right
And,
back at you.
yeah, but it was so informative. Again, just when you speak, I learned so much more. And I did put in the chat that, although this process lacks a lot of things and can be frustrating, I think it's pretty amazing and so worthwhile to be involved, at whatever level does work. And that CHN can really, organize healthcare providers to be part of, the process to make a difference. So yeah, thank you, Lisa. I wish I could think of more questions, but right at this moment, I'm just like so in awe, kind of. You know
Aw.
what I mean? Honest. You
Vanessa,
guys know.
you are and were amazing. And I have to say for myself, getting that zero EV school bus bill over the finish line, was probably just one of the most gratifying, fulfilling things that has happened since I've started working in this space. And I really credit Climate Health Now and our trusted health voices. I mean, they
Mhm,
really,
mhm.
really do make an impact.
I could ask you this. What do you think, like, in terms of this legislative year? I think it's even more uphill, right? But, you know, can we influence more by saying, not just healthcare impacts for populations that we serve, but also the cost factor seems to me to be really important, that we say, this can actually save costs by doing this or not doing this, that kind of thing.
Vanessa, that is huge because as we can see, it seems like following the money talks, it just seems to, be so important. I have to have a shout out also to, I saw Amanda signed the letter from Stanford that they put out a letter saying we should not be taking fossil fuel money for our research. I ended up having to research that a little bit for another legislative meeting, and I was just shocked at how much money is going even into research at our universities and all of the data that shows how industry money really can affect research to be pro-industry. It's just happened time and time again, something that we just hate to even think of. But so Vanessa, I think the money arguments are huge.
Amanda?
Yes, awesome. Yeah, Lisa, that's a really wild thing that's happening at Stanford. I can look for a link to share in the chat in a second. My question is about spot bills, which I don't think we talked too much about, but my question, if you want to kind of spend a minute saying what a spot bill is, and then I'm curious if they have the same process, like they are assigned a staffer, that you would still sort of follow that protocol for finding out about them, or is there something different?
That is a great question. Shrin and I actually were talking yesterday about whether to talk about spot bills because it's good to go get way into the weeds. So I was saying that legislation, it has to be introduced, a bill has to be introduced by February 16th. But there's a way to get around that deadline. And a legislator might introduce a bill with just really vague language. And it's kind of like a spot bill or a placeholder bill with the understanding that they would come up with more language later on to add in. And Shrin and I were just looking to see when the deadline for the actual language for a spot bill comes up. It turns out that deadline is from the Legislative Council. That's the group where you have to send your bill's draft for legal review and actual the official language. And they have deadlines. They said in order for a spot bill to have the language, I think the deadline was February 26th for the Assembly, and it's in March. I think it might be today for the Senate, so that they can still have that bill go to the Rules Committee to go to the policy committees. And so my understanding is, yes, then once that bill has its official language, there ought to be a staffer. It ought to go to the policy committees. But whenever I have a question, I just found like picking up the phone like just seemed to be the best thing. So I was saying, Sharon, we probably ought to just call the bill's author and say, what's the deal with your spot bill? Is it actually coming out? Do you have a staffer? All of that. There was always like all this discussion, like for appropriations, are we allowed to do this or does our letter have to do this? So I just found like calling the appropriations committee number was really the best way to go. It's funny, like you don't really talk to people on the phone that much anymore, but that's what I would do. At one appropriations thing, they said, well, we're not going to send your letter to all of the appropriations committee members, but you can call all of the members' offices and find out where you can email the letter to. And I'm kind of going, okay, I guess I don't have anything else to do but call all of these offices. And I did get the information. And then just to share, like all of a sudden, like these staffers would sometimes just start talking to me. And that's how I found out a lot of information was just by like, hi, I'm just, so-and-so, and someone, a Republican staffer, it's like, oh, my mom's a nurse, oh yeah, what do you need to do, and I think he was like, oh, I hate to say it, kind of mansplaining, to me, like, oh, no, when it goes to the appropriations, this is what really happens. And so I don't know, the process can be so kind of frustrating and daunting, but it's also like there's a lot of making connections and meeting wonderful people like all of you, and just kind of I don't know, I find it, for me, the antidote to being depressed and despairing about what's going on is just like these little actions, even little actions, and it's kind of kept me going. Sometimes I also have to withdraw and kind of do my mental health thing, but a lot of times working on this has just been it's just been really fun and fulfilling, and like my kids are proud of me for doing it, kind of thing.
Heck yeah, so are we.
Aw.
Yeah, so thank you so much. This has been hugely useful, and I really do think every year we could revisit this and learn more. So it's just the beginning, y'all. We got an exciting year ahead of us, and there will be more. And like you talked about, Schwinn will be leading a meeting April 5th, I think it's a Thursday, about kind of campaigns and how do we get behind the bills that we're going to work on and or regulations. So there's lots more to come, but this was really great. And we appreciate you all joining us, and we will share the resources like Amanda said, so we can all continue to learn from them. So thank you. All right, have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Lisa, oh yeah, do your whole thing. Lisa is doing awesome emojis.
I'm learning all of these little.
You don't know how to do this, but
Ah,
her
there
Zoom
it
is better
is.
than our Zoom. Yes.
Yay.
Thank you, Lisa, so much.
Oh, you guys are the best. Thank you.